The United Nations has condemned an attack on the US embassy in Belgrade. Serbian protesters stormed and set fire to the building on Thursday evening in protest over Kosovo Independence. A burned body was later recovered from the premises, thought to be that of a protester. Journalists and policemen were reported to be among the 150 people injured. The Serbian government has called the attacks unacceptable and the work of extremists. The night of violence in the Serbian capital came as hundreds of thousands of people held a peaceful rally to protest Kosovo's independence. It's reported that some of those protesters who took part in the mass rally in Belgrade are heading to Mitrovica in Kosovo on Friday in a show of support to the Serbian minority living there. For more, our correspondent Daria Pushkova reports from Belgrade.
This is the essence of Serbia's rage. Anger burst out of protesters and flames burst out of the windows of the American embassy. The rioters set the embassy building and flag on fire after smashing windows and doors to get inside. Black smoke filled the air. A burned body was later found, apparently belonging to one of the demonstrators. Foreign journalists were also the target, with anger aimed at Western powers who supported Kosovo's self-proclaimed independence. Any camera was perceived as a foreign intrusion. Russia Today's camera crew was split up by police cordons, arriving on the scene amid a hail of stones. Riot police were barely in control. They couldn't tell who was a friend and who a foe. All they knew was that they had to restore order on the streets of Belgrade. With the help of tear gas and armored vehicles, they managed it. Early on Thursday, people traveled to the capital for a peaceful rally aimed at showing the world Serbia's unity in denouncing Kosovo's self-proclaimed independence.
As Russia says, it's our land. It can't be anyone else's. Do you understand that? I have a brother in Kosovo, and my heart is aching.
I hope we can change something.
Thousands filled in square in front of the parliament building. Politicians overcame their differences and united on stage to speak to the people, along with actors, singers and prominent sports figures. The country's Prime Minister Vojislav Koštunica said Serbia doesn't recognize the language of force. He also reminded his people that Serbia is not alone in defending its sovereignty and fighting against the violation of international law.
The Serbian people have nothing to fear, as they have the friendship and fundamental support of President Putin, the head of the Russian Federation.
В этой многотысячной толпе стало просто опасно говорить по-английски, зато русский здесь воспринимают как родной. Сербы говорят, что они ощущают поддержку России, и только на нее вся надежда.
Serbia and Russia, Orthodox people, Russia's big, all the best to Putin.
After the demonstration, many managed to tame their anger and proceeded to the church of Saint Sava for a public mass. They say to pray for Kosovo's salvation. The quiet prayers of this solemn ceremony was something that couldn't be taken away from the people of Serbia. Daria Pushkova, Russia Today, Belgrade.
While violent protests fire up the streets of Belgrade, others are already dealing with the consequences of change. And for one woman, an independent Kosovo will be the fourth country she has been in during the 8 decades she has lived in her village. Our correspondent Paula Sleer reports on the latest Balkan borderline.
Olivera Milic has lived in this house for 78 years. She's never left her village, but has already been a citizen of 3 countries, and from this week, she's the citizen of a 4th. Olivera was born in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. She grew up in the Communist Republic of Yugoslavia. Her adult years were spent in Serbia, and now she's living out her final years in the new state of Kosovo. She has to work in the field as hard as she did as a young girl, because it's not clear which country is responsible for paying her pension.
I lived my whole life in Serbia. They tell me my house is the first house on the new border, but for me, in my heart, I will always be in Serbia.
A few meters from Olivera's house, NATO has spent more money in the last 24 hours than she's earned in her whole life. The infrastructure for a new international border is in place, just hours after the previous border crossing was burned to the ground by angry Serbs. I'm standing on the border. The village that you see behind me is part of this new country called Kosovo, but its cemetery, which is just a few minutes walk away, is now part of Serbia. What this means is that for residents of this village to visit their dead, they now have to go through passport controls into a different country. Milan Petrovic's father, grandfather and uncles are buried in the cemetery. He's furious that one day it might become part of a different country. He already has to go through border controls to visit his family, who live only 3 kilometers away. He takes us to his house, where his wife makes us coffee. The television's constantly tuned to the local news and what the Belgrade government is planning to do.
This is Serbia, it always will be. We will keep our Serbian passports. We will always be citizens of Serbia. They can never take that away from us.
And these are not empty words. Neither checkpoints nor NATO troops can touch the soul of the people who live here. Paul Islia, Russia Today, on the new Serbia-Kosovo border.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the Kosovo situation has shifted international attention from more pressing issues and disrupted key international partnerships. He says Kosovo independence creates a dangerous precedent for international politics and negotiations with Belgrade and Pristina should have continued. The Foreign Minister spoke exclusively to our correspondent, Maria Filoshna.
We would be doing everything in our capacity. First of all, to preserve the international law. This entire development certainly did not help our relations with the European Union and the United States, with whom we wanted to promote a real partnership to resolve acute world problems. And Kosovo was not among the most difficult ones. It was not among the most topical, and it was not the hotbed, just like Palestine or other places in the Middle East which required our utmost attention. Unfortunately, by concentrating on absolutely illegitimate unilateral course for Kosovo, this important amount of attention was diverted from much more needed action in other parts of the globe. So we hope that this would not be detrimental to the efforts of the international community to resolve the real, not imagined situations and to achieve the real common goals, not the goals which are artificial. As far as our practical policy is concerned, certainly we would have into account that the precedent has been created, that the double standards have been applied, and we would not be just engaging in some kind of parody of what happened regarding Kosovo. We would be defending the need to continue negotiations on Kosovo, to resume negotiations, and I have reasons to think that the actual developments on the ground would more and more persuade the European Union, first of all, who undertook upon itself this burden, that negotiations must be resumed.
Shortly after Kosovo announced its independence, Georgia's breakaway republics of South Ossetia and Abkhazia say they are determined to win support for their own sovereignty. May this move, Kosovo's independence, affect Russia's policy towards these republics?
We will be proceeding from our responsibilities as participants of the current negotiating formats. We are not very happy that the Georgian side tries to undermine the existing negotiating format, the existing peacekeeping mechanisms. We hope these attempts would be stopped, and the first and absolutely necessary step for Georgia to make is to sign the long-awaited agreements committing each side not to use force to resolve either Abkhazian or Southern Ossetian conflict.